Welcome back to Cheddar Business. Federal Reserve officials are going to wrap up their two-day meeting Wednesday after discussing whether they will need to lower the benchmark interest rate, if not now, later in the summer potentially. Joining us now is Seth Denson, co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors. Seth, it's good to have you with us again. What do you expect to hear from the Fed today?
Good to be with you. You know, I think everybody's on pins and needles waiting to see what the Fed does. Personally, I don't think they cut rates today. I think that the Fed is looking at the overall economy, and while growth might have slowed a little bit, we still have a booming economy. You cut rates when the economy starts to take a downturn. It's not turning down. It's still growing. You just may not be growing at the pace that we've seen it grow in the past. So I think that as we go into the G20 at the end of this month, as the president starts to look at things, the Fed is going to not want to use the bullet of a rate cut going into that, rather have it in their arsenal following that.
But Seth, don't you think some sort of expectation of a rate cut is priced in for the remainder of the year? I mean, look at the rally that we've had this month.
Yeah, I mean, listen, on your show last week, I said I did expect that there would be a rate cut this year, at least one, possibly two. That's just, again, my own thought on that. But I don't know that it's right now. Again, we're still seeing growth. We haven't seen a downturn. Why go ahead and cut interest rates now when we're still seeing a growing economy?
That's a really good point, and I think that one disconnect is with that traditional macroeconomic policy and what the Fed uses in order to determine whether it needs to cut rates is the way that President Trump thinks about rates and interest rates and rate cuts. I mean, he wants them because he wants to see the market move higher. That's not necessarily where the Fed should be taking their cues, though.
Well, no. Listen, the whole thing that the president rallied against was the fact of China's ability to manipulate the market, what we're seeing right now on the euro and the devaluation of their currency. And so if the president wants to, as we say in Texas, eat his own cooking, he shouldn't be trying to move the Fed to lower interest rates just because it might help boost an already growing economy. That flies in the face of what we don't want to see, which is where the executive branch has absolute power to control the economy.
So, Seth, it looks like the general consensus here is that the word patient is going to be removed from the Fed statement that we get later this afternoon, basically laying the groundwork for a potential rate cut down the road, potentially as early as July. Do you think that patience is going to be removed? And if so, how do you think markets are going to react?
You know, I do. Again, I said it last week. I think the markets have stepped back a little bit and stopped acting so erratically emotional based on a day-to-day interaction. And so I don't know, the markets might shift a little bit, but I don't see a vast movement in the market as a result of what happens today with the Fed, barring that there's not a rate cut. Again, giving predictions on what's going on in today's economy with the administration where it is and the bully whip that President Trump oftentimes tends to use, we do see a rate cut, well, we're having a different conversation tomorrow.
You know, one of the stories that emerged yesterday, I think caught some of us market watchers by surprise. We did see the market initially dip on this news about reports that Trump did consider demoting Fed Chair Jay Powell back in February, a guy he had appointed to be chair of the Fed because Jay Powell was not consistent with Trump's broad idea of what he wanted to see through here in the administration. Legally, does the president have the ability to do that? And whether or not you know the legality of this, I mean, what could be the potential impact on the markets if he did move forward with that?
Well, listen, I'm not a lawyer, but what I'm seeing and what I've read leads me to believe that no, the president doesn't have legal authority to remove the Fed chair unless there's some type of wrongdoing, and there's not here. But you got to understand that the way that this president operates from a business mindset, he built his brand on the words "you're fired." So because of that, he is bringing that same mentality. And that's not always a bad thing. People need to understand they need to do their job well. When it becomes a blend of what's right for the economy versus what's right for politics and policy, that's when we start to have a problem. The Fed chair does not need to go. I like that the Fed chair has actually come out and said, I'm not stepping down. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to do it to my fullest. Because that's what we need. We need stability in the actual operation of the economic system.
Sorry, Seth. I just lost your audio for a second. I just wanted to say it wasn't just that report. President Trump essentially doubling down on this yesterday afternoon, telling reporters in response to a question about whether he considered demoting Fed Chair Powell, quote, "Let's see what he does. I want to be given a level playing field, and so far I haven't been." There's this over and over again, the idea that President Obama got something different in terms of the economy that he was, inherited than President Trump.
What do you think, Seth?
Well, listen, the economy is always fluid. It's always moving. It's going to have ups and it's going to have downs. No president has inherited the exact economy that the president prior to them did. It's what they do with what they're handed. That's why we elect presidents, why we elect our officials. It's not so that they can just maintain status quo. It's so that they can try to work to improve a system. And so there is no such thing as level playing field, no matter what the president hopes he can get.
Okay, Seth Denson, co-founder and chief strategist at GDP Advisors. Seth, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, always good to see you, Seth. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
One thing I want to highlight, Tim, is we keep talking about cutting rates to improve the U.S. standing in the trade war with China, but what we can't forget and what last night showed us is that President Trump wants to tout the economy on his 2020 re-election bid and how cutting rates could potentially help that narrative.
Well, much more on that next hour. In the meantime, coming up, we're talking Google's shareholder meeting. It could be pretty bumpy. We're going to tell you why right after this.